That better? All right. We're studying on the miracles of Jesus, learning several things. We want to keep stressing, I think it's really important to keep stressing that when we talk about miracles, not just the miracles of Jesus, Jesus worked miracles, but he wasn't the only one, but they were always for a purpose. And the purpose was to reveal and confirm, to reveal truth and confirm truth. That's what miracles were about. Obviously, like last week, we talked about a couple of instances where Jesus healed people. As we go through the course of this study, we'll talk about more of the healings that Jesus did. Obviously, those people who got healed received an immediate benefit. There's no doubt about that. But not every sick person got healed. Why did some get healed and others did not? And the answer to that is because the miracles weren't just for healing's sake. The miracles were primarily for evidence, for proof, to reveal truth and confirm it. In the case of Jesus, to reveal that he was in fact the only begotten Son of God and to confirm that truth. That's what the miracles that Jesus performed, that's what they were for. All right, if you're looking at your study guide, we're on lesson 3. If you don't have one, don't worry, you can follow along in the scripture text. We're going to look at 2 instances where there were great draughts of fishes. That's King James English, draughts of fishes. I mean big catches, big loads of fishes that Jesus was able to accomplish. I was thinking, Wade, miracles are miracles. Miracles are all fine. If I was going to pick a miracle, I'd like somebody to work this miracle for us when we go fishing. Show us where they're at and get a boatload. But Jesus did that on at least 2 occasions here. We're going to look at them in our study tonight. So let's start with the first one, Luke chapter 5. Luke chapter 5. Begin reading with me at verse 1. Luke 5, verse 1. It came to pass that as the people pressed upon him to hear the word of God, he stood by the lake of Gennesaret and saw 2 ships standing by the lake, but the fishermen were gone out of them and were washing their nets. And he entered into one of the ships, which was Simon's, and prayed him that he would thrust out a little from the land. And he sat down and taught the people out of the ship. Now when he had left speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out to the deep and let down your nets for a draught." And Simon answering said to him, "Master, we have toiled all the night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word I will let down the net." And when they had this done, they enclosed a great multitude of fishes, and their net brake. And they beckoned unto their partners which were in the other ship, and that they should come and help them. And they came and filled both the ships, so that they began to sink. And Simon Peter saw it, and he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." For he was astonished, and all that were with him, at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And so was James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. And Jesus said unto Simon, "Fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." And when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Okay, so I asked you in the questions, where did this take place? And it says that he was by the lake Gennesaret. Now, I know that that's not something you've never heard of, but is it known by some other terminology? What is the lake of Gennesaret? It's Galilee. It's the lake of Galilee. We call it the Sea of Galilee is what we usually refer to it as. It's also sometimes called the Sea of Tiberias or Lake Gennesaret. It's all the same place. So we know about where that was. Jesus entered into the ship. It says initially that he was wanting to get some distance away. Sort of picture this in your mind's eye. Here's Jesus, and the crowd is just mobbing him. I mean, they're right on him. He's by the sea. I mean, if we go back, I'm in the water. But he can't effectively address the whole crowd of people because they're all right upon him, pressed upon him. And so he asked Simon to take him out in the boat just a distance away. And you can almost picture this as almost like a natural amphitheater kind of arrangement, because you would have to imagine that the bank sloped up away from the Lake Gennesaret. Here's Jesus just off a ways. And so it almost would be like a natural amphitheater effect. Jesus could speak effectively to the whole crowd of people. Do what?
Acoustics on the water is just amazing.
And so,
I've been on the lake during the night, and I can hear people talk, and I can't hardly even see where they're at.
you might see the light from the house way over there.
But you can hear them talk.
So the lake itself would have produced an amplification effect. So this would have been pretty effective. Yeah, the sound waves are going to reflect off the water. Yeah. So this would have been a very effective technique, no doubt. Sometimes we refer to Jesus as the master teacher, which he is. And usually when we refer to him as the master teacher, we're talking about his skill at presenting material in a way that people could easily connect with the material he was presenting. But here's another, maybe this is just another little aspect of Jesus' skill as a teacher. He had some presentation, we would probably call this presentation skills. He had some skills at presentation, in making it so he got in a spot where people could hear him effectively. All right, so who were the fishermen here? Well, Peter, because it's Peter, he gets in Peter's ship and tells him to cast out a little ways. Verse 10 mentions James and John, the sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. So we know certainly those three were involved here, Peter and James and John. You'd have to think almost, although I don't, as I'm looking at this, I don't think you could say with absolute certainty, but you'd have to think that Andrew was probably with Peter in the process here too, although he's not named in the text. So certainly Peter, James, and John, and probably Andrew. Now what's interesting is the expression there at the end of verse 2, they were washing their nets. So these nets, so they're not fishing, Wade, like we do with hook and line. They're fishing with nets. They're throwing cast nets out and drawing them in, right? So these materials that the nets are made out of are not, they're not going to be, durable synthetic materials like we would probably use if we were trying to do the same thing. These are probably almost certainly cotton or hemp or some kind of natural material that has been carefully woven into strings, tied into nets. But they're valuable. That's the livelihood of these fishermen. That's what they make their living with, is these nets. So when you've been out fishing, you just don't throw them in a heap and leave them there, because they are contaminated from being used in the fishing process. And if you don't care for those, in very short order, they're going to rot. Those natural fibers will rot and the nets will be worthless. And those nets are their livelihood. And so when they come in, notice Peter said, "We have toiled all night." They've been out fishing all night long. They're tired. But you've got to take care of the nets. You can't just let the nets, wet nets, lay in a heap. They're going to rot real quick. And you're not going to have anything to make your livelihood with. And so they are washing their nets. Usually in the process of that, another place, a whole other context, talks about amending their nets. So probably as you bring them in, as you wash them, as you clean them, you're going to find a few spots where the cords have broken or maybe come untied. You put them back. These nets are important, and they're working at that. I mean, that's not an easy job, and it's kind of a tedious kind of thing to do. That's what they're doing. So Jesus says to Peter, after he'd done speaking, so he got done with the teaching that he intended to do. And in verse 4, when he left off speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a draught." I don't know. We've been fishing all night. I mean, I am bone tired. And we have just about got these nets ready to put up. We have been working and washing and mending these nets, and we just about got everything cleaned up and ready to stow. And you want us to go again. That's what go. Launch out in the deep. Let down for a draught of fishing. You would think that most people would have made a pretty strong pushback on that. I don't think so. I just don't think I'm going to do that. That doesn't seem like a very good idea at this juncture after what we have been through. Some of us who fish could probably relate to what Peter said. We have fished all the night and taken nothing. All of us who fish have been out plenty of times and taken nothing. Pretty discouraged, not anxious to try it again today anyway. We'll go out again, but not today. But no, I think you probably have heard sermons, and lots of sermons have been preached on Peter's answer there in verse 5 when he said, Master, we have toiled all the night and have taken nothing. Nevertheless, at thy word, I will let down the net. Usually when we teach on this text, the point that we make is, from a logical standpoint, it didn't make sense to go out fishing again. Probably the best fishing would have been at night. They didn't catch anything all night long. And now we've got our gear cleaned up, and you want us to dirty it up again and put it out. But it doesn't make sense to me. Nevertheless, at thy word, Peter said, I will let down the net. That's what faith does, right? Some people will say something. Baptism doesn't make any sense to me. In my mind, I don't make the connection. How could getting my body wet with water have anything to do to accomplish the salvation of my eternal soul? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. I'm not going to do it because it doesn't make sense to me. Now, we can argue about the sensibility of baptism, and there actually is good sense to baptism. But let's just grant that person said, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense to me. The attitude that we ought to have when we learn an instruction from God is, nevertheless, at thy word. If that's what God said, it doesn't actually have to make sense to me. I think it does typically make sense to us if we take time to consider it and understand all that the Scriptures teach on a given subject. It makes sense. But it doesn't have to. At thy word. It should be our attitude. Thoughts or comments here, anybody? Any thoughts? All right. So they go out when they had this done, that is, they cast out and they launched out into the deep and they dropped the net. They enclosed a great multitude of fish, and their net brake. Though it's such a load, the net is not holding up to the load of fishes. They beckoned unto their partners which were in the other ship that they should come and help them, and they came and filled both the ships, so they began to sink. I don't know how many fish that is. That's a lot of fish, right? These guys are not recreational fishermen. These guys are commercial fishermen. This is what they do for a living. And so these ships are not, this is not just a tiny little dinghy or a rowboat. This is a ship made for the purpose of commercial fishing. They fill up 2 ships so full with fishes that the ships are beginning to sink. I don't know how many that is, but that's a lot of fish. Tom?
Also, we know from other places, the ship were of some size because when Jesus calmed the storm, he was down in the bow of the ship, and they had to wait him to come up. So there was enough room for you to stretch out and sleep where it was. So here, the whole...
Assuming this was the same kind of ship, it probably was.
Probably was. Well, it was Peter Andrew's ship that he was on. Fair, so you think it would be the same ship.
It very likely. I don't think you couldn't. You have trouble proving it, but very likely. I would say they're fair-sized ships.
Fair-sized ships. So, I mean, they're not like a big ocean liner.
No.
They're not like one of our big trawlers, because the lake isn't that big.
Yeah.
And, to begin with, it's several miles across and 20-some miles long or something like that. It's a pretty significant sized lake.
Yeah.
But it has some steps to it. So, here you have a ship that is capable of holding a crew, the nets, and a good hold for ships, for fish. And the weight of the fish was enough to pretty well overload the ship.
They were overloaded. That's the exact word. They were overloaded. They began to sink. Gary?
Most of those Galilean fishing boats, they was about 30 foot long.
Yeah.
Longer, and about 4 or 5 foot
I would think that these ships were on that order, wouldn't you? More than likely, they're pretty big. And so what we're saying is the fact that both ships were on the verge of sinking indicates a huge draught, if we want to use the King James language, a huge draught, a huge load, a big catch of fishes. Now, so this wasn't the kind of a situation where Peter or one of the others said, it's been a couple years since we caught that many fish. Now, me and my dad and brother, James and John said, me and my dad and my brother, we was out there about, I'm saying it was 10 months ago, and we caught a load like that. But it's been a while since we caught a load like that. It wasn't like that, right? This was of the nature they had never seen before, because notice Peter's reaction in verse 8. Simon Peter saw it, he fell down at Jesus' knees, saying, "Depart from me, for I'm a sinful man, O Lord." Peter, a professional fisherman, realized that no mortal man could have affected this outcome. No mortal man could have brought this to pass. This is off the charts. This is not normal. This is supernatural. This is a miracle. Peter knows that. Peter knows fishing. He's a professional fisherman. And he knows you don't see this. This never happens. This is not just a rare occurrence. This is an impossible occurrence. And so he humbly acknowledges Jesus, that he was clearly in the presence of a man of God. "Depart from me, for I am a sinful man, O Lord." He was astonished, and those that were with him at the draught of the fishes which they had taken. And included also in this astonishment were James and John, sons of Zebedee, which were partners with Simon. So as we said earlier, we know James and John were here to see this miracle and be overwhelmed and impressed by Jesus and what he had done. Jesus said, "Simon, fear not, from henceforth thou shalt catch men." Now, here's an interesting thing about sort of the tail end of this story. It says, when they had brought their ships to land, they forsook all and followed him. Now, the point has been made, I think I've tried to make the point before, that this would have been a windfall profit for these professional fishermen. They just brought in more fish than they'd ever seen before, more fish than they'd ever caught before. But it doesn't say when they brought their ships to land after they had had a chance to process all the fish that they took. It's going to take us the rest of the day at least to process this load of fish. We'll see you tomorrow, Lord. It says they forsook all and followed him. They walked away from this windfall of fish. Now, when I said that in the past, it has been pointed out, I think it's a fair point. Look in Mark chapter 1. This is obviously not the same. This is not the same context at all. But in Mark chapter 1, beginning at verse 16, as Jesus walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting a net in the sea, for they were fishers. Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. And straightway they forsook their nets and followed him. And when he had gone a little further thence, he saw James the son of Zebedee and John his brother, who also were in the ship mending their nets. And straightway he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the ship with the hired servants and went after him. So I think you got to factor that in, that when they left the catch of fish and followed Jesus, it's not like I think sometimes we got to be careful about straining to make a point that may not be in the text. The point is, they just walked away from a windfall. Maybe not. Maybe their hired servants, Zebedee himself, others could have processed the catch and it didn't go to waste. So again, the reason I'm saying that is, we want to be a little bit careful about not trying to make a point bigger than it is. But it is commendable on their part that they were willing to walk away and follow Jesus, having just, I think a lot of us, you want us to leave now? The fish have just started biting. Are you crazy? let me stay here until this big run is over. They forsook all and followed him. And so that's really to their commendation. Thoughts or comments here, anybody? Again, I think we see the point that we've been trying to stress throughout our study is this miracle served a purpose. And Peter's confession there in verse 8 that I'm a sinful man, O Lord. Depart from me, I'm a sinful man, O Lord. The miracle demonstrated that Jesus wasn't just a regular person. That there was something extra special about him, that he could do something like has just been done with this great draught of fishes. So we always want to emphasize miracles and their purpose. And the purpose is seen and served in this text. Any final thoughts on this, Clayton?
Peter was married, I don't know, I guess the rest of them probably weren't, but this could have also helped care for their families. I mean, these men are walking away from supporting their families. All this fish could have been used to take care of them while they're gone.
Okay. We know Peter was married. We don't know about the others, but at least in Peter's case, he had family that could have really benefited from this. And if he put his family before the Lord, his answer would have been, I'll be there in a few days, but right now I got to take care of this business. And he didn't. I think that's a good observation. John?
The other direction, and he demonstrated to them that they could produce, these tremendous results. If they just followed him and did what he said, they would allow the world to be bigger than men and draw that kind of thing to God.
So he actually called them to a higher, more noble calling, more than fishing for fishing for men. Years ago, I should be able to remember the author. There was a class workbook that lots of churches used. Wayne, can you remember? Fishers of Men, it was called. Do you remember that workbook? Did Haley write it? And it was about personal work. It was about how to teach and convert people. But he used this expression, fishers of men. Go out and not catch fish, but catch men. All right. Okay. All right. So now, just from looking at these two, so we're going to look at this second episode, but it's in John 21. All right. Luke 5, we just read Luke 5. That would have been early on in the work of Jesus. John 21, on the other hand, is actually late. In fact, it's after his resurrection. We're going to read about another instance where they caught a huge load of fish, but it's clearly not the same case, because in John 21, we're going to be reading about things that happened after his resurrection. So let's turn to John 21. John 21, beginning verse 1. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias, and on this wise showed he himself. There were together Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples. Simon Peter said unto them, I go a-fishing. They said unto him, We also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Then Jesus saith unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered him, No. And he said to them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. And the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits, dragging the net with fishes. And as soon as they were come to the land, they saw a fire, and coals thereon, and fish laid thereon, and bread. Jesus said to them, Bring of the fish which ye have now caught. And Simon Peter went up and drew the net to the land, full of great fishes, 153. For all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Jesus said to them, Come and dine. And none of the disciples durst ask him, Who art thou? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then cometh and taketh bread and giveth them, and the fish likewise. This is the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after that he was risen from the dead. Okay, now a couple things here. Obviously, this is a different episode because it is clearly after his resurrection. It was on the Sea of Tiberias. We already said the Sea of Galilee is known as Lake Gennesaret or the Sea of Tiberias. It's all the same body of water, so don't be confused by that. So, who was there? Well, it names them in verse 2. Simon Peter, Thomas called Didymus, Nathanael, King of Galilee, and the two sons of Zebedee, James and John, and two other of his disciples. Now, the speculation arises as to what were these guys up to anyway. Verse 3, Peter says to them, I go a-fishing. And they said to him, we also go with thee.
I was talking at this, they had changed, while Jesus was living with them, they were with his plan that he was going to build his church and build his kingdom. But after he had passed away, they had seen him. This is the third time I think they had seen him. So I think they had really had kind of, I don't know how you word it, kind of set back their plans a little bit. How is this going to accomplish? How are they going to accomplish this now that Jesus has been crucified?
Yeah, usually the way this is viewed is that they were sort of going back to their former lifestyle, their former livelihood. They had been fishers of men, now they're going back to fishing because Jesus died, and that episode is over. Now, I think the point that you made, Gordon, is the right one because it says at verse 14, this is the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after that he was risen from the dead. So this wasn't the first time that they'd seen Jesus resurrected. It was actually the third time. But you kind of get the impression that maybe they're having a hard time accepting it as being real, that the resurrection actually happened. Eric?
Third time this group of guys saw him, or this is the first time this group saw him?
Well, the apostles, Peter and James and John are among the apostles. We know that they saw him in Jerusalem before they left. And, they were told, go to Galilee and I'll see you there. So we know that at least in the case of Peter, James, and John, I think also in the case of Thomas and Nathanael, they were among the apostles. They would have seen Jesus in Jerusalem. So it makes you wonder, they having a little time assimilating all this? Trying to put all the puzzle pieces together? Yeah, maybe it was a vision. We saw Jesus. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe it was his ghost. Maybe we were hallucinating. Maybe it's not legit. Let's go fishing. Let's get back. Let's just go back. This episode in our lives is over, and we might as well just get back to making what money we can catching fish. That's the way it's usually viewed. And that may be a little bit of strong reading between the lines there. You don't know the mindset of these guys. You don't know that is what they were thinking. But a lot of people speculate maybe that's what's going on until they fully become convinced that Jesus is resurrected. Anybody thoughts, Tom?
The other one thing is, a lot of them departed Jerusalem because they feared the high priest. They did that to our Lord. Was able to do all these things. Let's go here now. Jesus appeared to them a couple times, and he had started giving them instructions on the scene where, so they're somewhere along the line, he gives them the instruction to go to Jerusalem and wait for me. All right. Whether this is leading up to that doing or, whatever. The book of John closes and then Acts goes in and starts telling them that he's with them, he's got them gathered together, and they see his ascension. So, there's a time frame in here that you still got a little fear of the chief priests. So what they're doing, they've got to distance themselves from that. They've got their families back up in Galilee. They back having those associations with them. And they're really instead of just sitting around here not doing something, let's go fishing, get this off our minds and relax a little bit. You know, sometimes, you know, I've been out, you get a lot of stuff trying out. I just can go fishing and put all this stuff behind me.
Yeah, but that makes it sound like recreational fishing, and I don't think these guys were
recreational, but just a stress relief.
Just get back to something that you know, something normal.
Where you feel comfortable,
Yeah.
normal, until you figure out what's going on.
Yeah.
So if Christ put together a familiar event to put back into their minds what they were taught.
Yeah. So I think that's a good point, John. So when he says cast the net on the other side and they bring up this big load of fish, they remember, Jesus did this once before. Then when they come to shore and there's some few fish and loaves, well, maybe that reminded them of feeding the multitudes. But I think purposefully Jesus is doing something here to connect with what they had known before. I think, Tim.
To me, if you read it, Jesus was the one that led them. He was the one that did all the preaching prior to his death. When he died, they lost their leader. So it wasn't until the next verse that Christ said, Peter, you are the one now who are going to lead, who are going to find my people. You are the one now who is going to feed my.
Toward the end of as that chapter goes on.
You know, they were lost. I mean, Christ had died. We aren't the one that did all the miracles per se. You know, Christ was doing us. He had died now. So I'm lost. What do I do now?
Yeah, I think they were struggling, don't you?
Yeah.
I think they were struggling to make sense of it all still. You know, what's the...
Right part of down.
Yeah,
Christ charges Peter now.
yeah,
This is what you are going to do.
yeah,
Not me, but you and the other disciples.
yeah. I think they were struggling for sure. So, I've been fishing a few times, and occasionally, if I'm fishing off this side of the boat and the guy's fishing off that side, and he's catching over there and I'm not catching over here, occasionally I'll sneak around and throw over on his side of the boat. You know, that's not unusual for fishermen to do that, but this is unusual, right? When and again, notice the similarity to the previous event. They had where does it say? They had fished all night and taken nothing. What verse was that? Verse 3, yeah. They went forth, entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. Now, when Jesus says, throw your net on the other side of the boat, it says that they brought in this huge load. It actually numbers them this time. They were great fish. This wasn't just a school of little sardines. These were great fish, 153. Way more than what would be typically expected in a situation like that. Now, in verse 6, when Jesus had cast the net on the right side of the ship, ye shall find they cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it in for the multitude. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved, that's John, right? That's John talking about himself. John says to Peter, it is the Lord. I mean, this great draught of fishes no doubt reminded him of the previous episode. He says, that's Jesus. That's Jesus that's on the shore there. There's kind of a question is sometimes raised. When Simon Peter heard it was the Lord. He girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. I think some people are troubled by that. What kind of perversion is this guy running naked in a boat fishing? That sounds so bizarre. But this is almost certainly a case of naked in the sense of not adequately clothed, you know. So this is heavy work. You're casting these nets and draw them in is heavy work. So he had taken his coat off. He almost certainly had on his tunic or undergarment of some sort or another. He wasn't, as we sometimes say, buck naked. He wasn't buck naked. He still had clothes on, but not what would be presentable or appropriate to go before the Lord. So he puts his coat on and swims ashore.
The discussions about proper dress and everything tell us that anything above the knee is considered
The,
You would produce that short.
the Bible frequently uses the word naked to mean not sufficiently clothed, not just totally naked. When we use the word naked, we mean naked, but the Bible doesn't necessarily mean that. So don't be troubled by that. I think maybe sometimes young people in particular are bothered when they read that. James?
New American Standard states his outer garment had been taken off, so
Yeah.
obviously he had an undergarment.
Yeah.
So it wasn't completely, and New American Standard doesn't have the word naked, so I think it's just, he was not fully dressed.
Yeah.
As opposed to having
Yeah.
covering, but not sufficient as to what he wanted to be before full.
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. All right. So Jesus, this episode is similar to the previous one in that he told them where to cast the net to catch the fish. And as we've been pointing out, there seems to be purposefully some intention to get the apostles and disciples to connect the dots, to get them to see the similarity of what's happening now to what we know. We were with Jesus when this happened, a good while back, way before the crucifixion. We were with Jesus, and something eerily similar to this happened. That's got to be Jesus. That's got to be Jesus. I think he's purposely connecting the dots. And I think that when they came to shore, as soon as they were come to land, they saw a fire of coals thereon, and fish laid thereon, and bread, fish and bread. Of course, that would have been a staple meal in that time and place, but makes you wonder if that wasn't also to remind them of the couple of instances where Jesus fed the multitudes with just a few fish and a couple loaves of bread, possibly. One thing that I think is really significant here is in verse 12, Jesus said to them, "Come and dine." None of the disciples durst ask him, "Who art thou?" knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then cometh and taketh bread and giveth them, and fish likewise. This is the third time that Jesus showed himself to his disciples after that he was risen from the dead. I'm taking, maybe you want to quibble with me about it, but I'm taking verse 13. Jesus come and taketh bread and giveth to them, and fish likewise. I'm taking it from that expression that Jesus ate with them here. That he ate fish and bread with them here. That he took it, not only did he take it to give to them, but he took it for himself as well. And if that is the case, if that's a proper understanding or interpretation of that, what would be the purpose of Jesus eating with them? John?
Just like he did when he appeared in the upper room.
Yeah.
He ate fish with that, to show that it's him, it's Christ, he's the living Christ.
Bodily resurrection. Exactly. So Jesus is making effort to demonstrate to him that it is him, that he is bodily resurrected from the dead. That's what was was expected of the Messiah. That's what Jesus predicted himself. And it wouldn't be enough if someone said, we think we saw Jesus' ghost. Well, you think you saw a ghost? I'm supposed to be convinced by that? No, I saw Jesus. He prepared food and ate with us. That's different, right? That's evidence of a bodily resurrection. And that's what had to be proved here. Now, back to the purpose of miracles. What's the purpose of miracles always? To reveal and confirm, reveal and confirm. This revealed Jesus is in fact resurrected from the dead and confirms that is the case. That's really important. I think we are maybe inclined to sort of take this for granted, to take the resurrection for granted, because we've grown up knowing about it, right? We've always heard that, and it's just, we accept that as being so. What if you were one of these guys? This just doesn't happen. And yet we saw it. We saw Jesus. We saw him alive. Kelly?
I think it's probably that there were 7 of them together, because if there was just one, and he said, I saw Jesus, and his testimony might be shaky, since all 7 of them were there.
Oh, I think so for sure. Kelly says the fact that there were a plurality of witnesses in this instance is important, because what if it was just Peter? Peter says, I think I'm just going to go fishing. Well, first of all, you don't do that kind of fishing by yourself. But let's just say, Peter says, I'm going fishing. And then he comes back a couple days later. You will not believe what happened when I went fishing the other day. I ran into Jesus on the bank of the lake, and we ate some fish and bread together. It was pretty neat. What would happen there is, Peter, I think you're on something. You know, have you been drinking, Peter? Were you drunk out there at the lake, or what makes you think you saw Jesus? You know, his testimony could have been brought into doubt if it was just one man saying that that's what he saw. But there were a multitude, or a plurality, I should say, probably, of witnesses. And that was the case over and over again. You know, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15 that there were more than 500 brethren who saw him all at once. That's significant. That's not just some weird dream or hallucination. All right. Thoughts or comments? Anybody? Clayton?
So it said they were about 300, or maybe like 100 yards offshore. So I could see if Jesus is standing on the bank, that they might not can tell for sure if that's him or not. But then when they come to the shore and they figured out who he is, it still kind of alludes to like maybe he looked different or something. This is they were kind of scared to ask who he was because they already knew, but you know what I'm saying?
That sort of raises a question. So Jesus' body was badly mutilated when he died on the cross, right? He had been beaten with the scourge literally to the point of death. Thorns crammed into his scalp, nails driven through his hands and feet. His body, although we take the Bible at its word, he didn't have any broken bone, but he had a pretty well mutilated flesh. He had lost all of his blood. He was in horrible. If you saw Jesus hanging on the cross, it would have made you sick to even see that. The question is, after the resurrection, what did he look like? Did he still have that mutilated appearance? James, thought on that?
He still had something of the scarring, because that's what Thomas had. He said, touch it, right? Obvious marks. So we don't know how gruesome it was. But
Yeah.
there's indication, obvious indication that he was.
Good point. So James is making a good point. He still had the nail prints in his hands and the spear thrust in his side, because when Thomas doubted, Jesus said, "Feel the nail prints. Put your hand in my side." Sarah?
Mark 16, verse 12, the road to Emmaus, it says, and after that he appeared in a different form to two of them.
Yeah. On the road to Emmaus, it was a different form.
And then later in Luke, in the same account, it says he opened their eyes and they recognized him in
Yeah.
Luke 24, 31.
Yeah. So there's kind of a question there. I mean, his appearance, but I think that those guys on the road to Emmaus, their eyes were blinded by the Lord until he made it obvious. But I've always wondered, and there's not any answer to, how much of the physical torturing of the body of Jesus was still evident when they made the connection. This is the resurrected Lord. I don't know. All right.
But he wasn't a ghost either.
He wasn't a ghost.
Because in Luke 24 and 39, behold my hands and my feet, that is myself. Handle me and see me, for my spirit does have flesh and bones as you as I have.
Again, he's stressing bodily resurrection, not just a spiritual resurrection.
Then down 41, do you have any food here to eat?
Yeah, and he ate with them again, right? Yeah. Tom?
Still working the whole scenario. There he is, for 100 yards off. He's calling from the shore, saying, "Do you have any fish?" "Oh no, we haven't caught anything." Sort of an indication is, okay, here's somebody looking for what would probably be normally, well, you're going out fishing or something, especially if you're looking for something. "Hey, do you have any fish?" Like wanting to buy or.
So they might have thought he was just a buyer.
Maybe just a buyer. But then it comes through and you see these other things that when they come ashore, there's a charcoal fire there and there's fish. Well, you're asking me whether you have any fish, you've already got fish on the thing, you know, so there's a lot of little things that live up. Charcoal fire is not something that you just, you know, start up, you know, right away. There's pressure, you know, there's preparation going on. You have to bring the charcoal out there. You don't, you know, do it. You know, they're looking, here they see a guy on the shore, they don't see the fire, and they get to the shore and there's a fire. I mean, you're not that far away where you couldn't see, you know, something, those embers, because it's still sort of dark and it's approaching daylight.
Yeah. Wade, next time we're fishing and I say cast out on the other side, you don't have to do that. I don't have that same kind of authority. Thanks, everybody.